Hey everyone, my name is Sam, and I will be going over the Star Wars soundtrack. First, I would like to introduce you to the main topics that I will be going over. So, at first, we have the introduction. Alright, so I'll be going over the Star Wars soundtrack and explain the subject and the purpose of the soundtrack. I was very interested in this topic, and whenever I was a little kid, me and my dad had great enjoyment whenever we would sit down and watch the Star Wars movies. We'd watch them in order, or we'd watch them in, as people online would say, the correct order, which was actually watching them in reverse from episode 4 back, and so on. And yeah, we always had enjoyment, and the soundtrack is really what actually got me into that like orchestra sound. And later on in life, in 6th grade through 12th grade, that's what got me into orchestra. For a fun fact. So for some background info and some details of the soundtrack, the film score was created by John Williams in 1977. Back in the day, soundtracks used to be a compilation of popular songs during that time in that era. So it was like a mix of what you were hearing on your day-to-day basis. So it was more cultural, and it wasn't so much a creation of music. So what John Williams decided to do was to conduct and create his own score for the film. It was a major success, and it was something that inspired many others to follow in that similar journey and follow his footsteps. So all these future films are coming out with these new scores and these new big grand symphonies, and he's one of the pioneers that really pushed the envelope for film scores. A little background about John is he actually has over 100 film scores for Hollywood films. So after Star Wars, honestly, he really got a big push into mainstream Hollywood and started doing all these epic scores for all these people, and it actually got him multiple Grammys and Oscars, which is a little fun fact as well. Next, we'll be going over the techniques and the inspiration of John. John was very much inspired by Eric Korngold's. The scores that he made were in the 30s and the 40s, and so John was very um, interested and started diving deep into his work, and that is what kind of sparked the interest of really creating for this film. So what he decided to do was dive deep and really put all his efforts into, getting the horns, getting the strings, getting the timpanis, all those percussion sounds that you hear that are very eerie and spooky, especially with the Imperial March that you later hear in the movies. But yeah, he decides to really dig deep, draw from his inspiration in the past and really just go for it, and it worked perfectly fine for him. A good technique that was used in the movie along with the soundtrack is with each main character, they almost have their own theme, which is pretty interesting. So what you'll find is, these big characters like Luke, you'll have Han Solo, you'll have Yoda, you'll have Darth Vader, and all these important characters. They each have their own little theme, and whatever is going on in the movie, almost it like builds like stepping stones with the score. So that's a very cool addition to the movie. It's also a similar technique, almost the same as Richard Wagner used in his operas. Again, as John was going back and digging for inspiration, Richard Wagner was on his sites, and that's what very it got his attention, and that's what he drew inspiration from, and he was very excited to implement that in Star Wars. So the technique and the melodies that were used for some of these big themes were, again, as I said, like stepping stones, and with each um, character and as they develop, the complexity of the melodies actually get more intense. These melodies were called leitmotifs. So it's a fun little fact, but yeah, it's very interesting, and I think John did a great job of really almost the music gave the story and the backbone of the characters, and I thought that was very cool. Some other cool thing about the music and the soundtrack was that in the background with some of the characters, for example, like with Darth Vader and Luke, Darth Vader being Anakin, of course, which is the father of Luke. If you haven't seen Star Wars, spoiler alert. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, there's some hidden things like some of the slight musical elements in Luke's theme and music. You can hear subtle influxes of that in Darth Vader's as well. It's like slight little echoes just to let you know, like a foreshadow almost. Because at this point in the story, you don't know that yet, but they just give that nice little musical touch, and it's a nice little foreshadow once you dig deep and really listen to the music. It's really fun. So actually, before I watched Star Wars, I actually heard about it a lot, obviously through my dad and other people growing up. And so whenever before watching the movie, the plot, um, I knew a little bit about the plot, but it wasn't a straight giveaway as it was for some others, and I think that was good going into it because it really let my imagination run wild, and especially with the music, like I said, it drew a big influence on me and my decisions later in life, like going into orchestra and really, pursuing music, and I thought that was really fun. It really inspires people, and what I think about these soundtracks is people are so focused on the movie that sometimes the soundtrack is on the back burner. But I feel for Star Wars, people really saw like, hey, the soundtrack carried the movie as well. So I think it's good to take into account that soundtracks are good for the movies, and without them, they would be very bland. And I give John Williams a lot of props and credit for that. Is he really strived for greatness, and he achieved, and I think that was a good stepping stone for him. And adding on to John, a lot of his inspiration came from people back in the Romantic era and all that. You have Beethoven, you have Bach, and there's many other composers that he drew inspiration from as well. You know, um, as someone who's doing the music, I am. You get all these inspirations musically from all these great composers from back then, and not only composers. As I said, Richard Wagner and his operas, it played a huge, huge role, and I think John did a great job of really, pulling from all these areas and meshing it all in one to really give you a big picture and a grand sound for this epic movie that is Star Wars. And you know, with George Lucas and creating Star Wars, I'm pretty sure he didn't know it was going to get as big as it was today. But as each movie goes on and it gets more and more success, John Williams, he played a role throughout each movie, and I think it's carried on today. Even with Disney having the rights over Star Wars, you can still see some of these themes and the inspiration that future composers and future people that are creating the soundtracks and the music for these new movies under Disney, they still go back and draw inspiration from Lucas, which drew inspiration from all these other artists. Art is like it's like a mirror, like it reflects. History goes on, but music it'll always travel, through inspiration, and I think that's it's a really cool part of what makes music, so big and what it is today. So yeah. Some of the importance of having these big themes and these music for each character, like for example when they enter the room, or like whenever Darth Vader was looking out of the ship and he was seeing all the ships fly by, and he was looking out the window and it was about to go down, and he was looking out the window, and that's when they first played the Imperial March, and you really feel like the climax of the story, and it really gave you that dark, eerie feeling like a war was about to go down. So I thought that was really cool. The music can also provide a foreshadowing of what is going to occur, and it can also provide a backdrop for what is occurring or is about to occur in the film. As I listed before about Darth Vader and the Imperial March theme, which is like his evil, like cool theme, is let's go more to the musical side of it. You get to hear a lot of great sounds. You really get to hear the strings, the horns, the low bass, like the tubas, the timpani drums. I think the percussion was very great, and it really gives it that very menacing feel of Darth Vader. And Darth Vader is really cool because he's one of the leading the leading Darth members, and It really sets the mood for what is going to come in the movie, because that is where there's a shift actually. And yeah, it's pretty amazing how good of a job John Williams did, especially with implementing timpani. Like, who would have thought that timpani would be played with Star Wars, an intergalactic war, and there's the timpani drum? I think it's very cool how he was able to implement that. So to conclude all these topics and everything that I was talking about the score, the history, and everything about the characters and the foreshadowing and the story itself, is that there are very fun and interesting things about this soundtrack that really dives deep and shows you where John's mind was at during the making of this film score. The soundtrack. And I think he really did a great job of giving each character. Um, he gave each character life. Each character was a moment for him to, explore new music ideas, new orchestral ideas, symphony ideas, and I think he did a great job of drawing him, like I said, drawing inspiration and really being able to, you know, diverse it and put it in each character, leaving a little piece of him in each character today. This soundtrack is, you know, regarded as one of the best in history. This soundtrack is to this day one of the most memorable and will always be realized as one of the greatest of all time. And for that, I really respect John Williams and his foresight and his ability to really mesh all these sounds and really get the most out of his hard work. And yeah, Star Wars is a very very great film. And if you have not seen the series or the movies or anything, I recommend that you go and you watch them in whatever order you want, because there's many ways you can watch them. And I suggest that you watch them and just really listen to the music. And I think you could really learn a lot, and maybe you can get some inspiration yourself from the movie. But yeah, it was great talking about John Williams and Star Wars. And I have the site sorted, and I will, reply to many of you guys. And yeah, it's been fun, seeing everybody's thoughts and opinions. And yeah, it's been a great time. Thank you so much.